We're now live on Facebook, and I'm so glad to see everyone here today. I hope you all had a great holiday and are ready to jump into business. My name is Julia Bryan, and I'm the chair of Democrats Abroad. I'm joined by Angela Fobbs, who is Democrats Abroad Global Black Caucus chair, as well as Lissette Wright, our treasurer, and our very special guest, Deval Patrick. As many of you guys know, we are running a global presidential primary starting in February of next year. Democrats outside the US will have the chance to vote at over 100 voting centers worldwide and through remote voting too. Wherever you are, you'll be able to join in and cast your vote for the Democratic presidential candidate of your choice. To make sure you have the chance to get to know every candidate who's on our ballot, we've reached out to each campaign team, asking them to join us in a global town hall so that you can hear from them directly. This also gives our candidates the chance to learn more about the issues that matter to you and to the millions of Americans living outside the United States. Today, our call is with Governor Deval Patrick from Massachusetts. Born on the south side of Chicago, Deval Patrick was raised by a single mother, and he spent much of his childhood on welfare. He became the first member of his family to attend college and law school. He went to Harvard University for both. And actually, following graduation, he lived abroad for a year. And I think he'll tell us a little bit about that experience, actually. And following that experience, he began working at the U.S. Department of Justice. He was appointed as the Assistant Attorney General by President Bill Clinton, where he coordinated the investigations of arson at Black churches across the South. Governor Deval spent a bit of time in the private sector before successfully running for governor of Massachusetts. After leaving office, he joined Bain Capital, where he launched an impact investing fund which targets social and environmental issues. We are delighted to have him join us today, and we really look forward to hearing his thoughts. Governor Patrick, are you ready to take it away?
I am, and thank you very much, Julia, for the warm welcome, and to you and to Angela and Lissette and all your colleagues who've joined today. Thank you very much for making time for me. We were talking before getting started about my own experience living abroad, and I was telling the story about graduating from college, not entirely sure what I wanted to do, and having the opportunity to live and work in Africa, which is on a fellowship called the Rockefeller Fellowship. And I'd never been outside the United States before. In fact, going to Massachusetts the first time from the south side of Chicago to Milton Academy was for me like moving to a different planet. But I set off to connect with someone who had invited me to join a UN project in Khartoum, Sudan. And I taught myself the greetings and the numbers in Arabic on the flight from Athens to Cairo, and then hitchhiked after some time in Cairo from Cairo down to Khartoum, which was about 3 weeks, the last 10 days or so, through the Nubian desert, looking like a piece of the desert when I finally got to Khartoum. I found the office of the man I'd been writing to for many months, and learned when I got there that he had left for 2 years the week before in Long Beach, California, and said nothing to his office about my coming. Eventually, I talked my way onto the project, and to get rid of me, basically, they sent me to Darfur, another 600 miles across the desert, out by the Chadi border. And I lived and worked there in 2 towns. No mail, no phone service. If my children tried this today, I'd kill them. But I figured it out. I learned the language. I learned how to make friends. I learned how to do the job, how to feed myself, how to live. And I think when you figure out that you can figure out anything, then is possible. For me, and the reason for the relevance of this story, Julia, is that I think in many respects it's when my understanding of the uniqueness of the United States really became clear. My sense of patriotism ran deep when folks asked very uncomplicated questions about things like the civil rights movement or how our government worked. And this notion that we are a great nation, not because of our military might or our material wealth alone, but because we are the only nation in human history organized around a handful of civic ideals that we have defined over time and through struggle as equality, opportunity, and fair play. That notion has been so important to the choices I have had the great blessing to make in living my own American dream. And I think we're at a point today in America where that dream is under fire from lots of different quarters and where it needs to be revived. And that has everything to do with why I'm running for president today.
Well, thank you. That's a really interesting introduction. And we, every one of us moved abroad and had a similar culture shock and experience like that. And so it's really interesting that you've had it as well. Just to get to some of our questions, our first question is on a topic that we all care very deeply about. And I think you are also very concerned about as well. Lissette, would you like to ask it?
Yes, hello everyone. Greetings from Canada. Governor Patrick, welcome, and we're really happy to have you. This question comes from both our Hispanic caucus and the Progressive Caucus.
Yes.
The climate crisis is a significant contributing factor to many conflicts and refugee situations around the globe, putting Americans abroad and all global citizens at risk due to political insecurity. How will you ensure that the U.S. will reduce greenhouse emissions below Paris Accord targets and lead the global effort to avoid catastrophic climate breakdown and the global insecurity it will cause?
Lissette, thank you for the question, and you are exactly right. I remember being in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, shortly after I announced, and one of the hosts there said the question about the climate crisis is not whether we're late. The question is whether we're too late. There are already surges in the river flow in Cedar Rapids, in Charleston, South Carolina, where they used to close downtown because the high tide would come in and flood the streets a couple of times a year. Now that happens a couple times a month. I'm very, very proud of the model that we've developed in Massachusetts, where we have a regional cap and trade system called the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. We use those proceeds to invest in energy efficiency. We have a statewide plan that we developed, a resilience and recovery plan that we developed and invested behind. And we use the opportunity to create a whole new industry in so-called clean tech jobs, in energy efficiency and solar and wind, which was one of the sectors that helped us climb out of recession faster than most other states. And I think there is a lot from that experience to scale nationally, indeed globally. If I understand it correctly, we can rejoin the Paris Accord on the Paris Accords on the first day that I am in office. I think that is a step in the right direction and a critical, both substantive and symbolic step. But I think our leadership globally has to take account of what we do at home. And what we do at home has to be around, I believe, efficiency and alternatives, and frankly, bringing in the folks who feel threatened by the move to a carbon-free future. So by that, I think, for example, let's go to coal country and let's talk to folks in coal country candidly. The Stone Age didn't end because we ran out of stone. It's because we got a better idea. And the same is true today around the climate crisis. So let's say to coal country, for example, how about we make this the home of the national wind industry development so that folks are brought in to this great new world, this innovative new world, and not feeling like it is just happening to them, that it's happening with them instead. So, and then of course, what we must do to bring the case to developing countries who are deeply concerned, and I think rightly so, that a move to a climate-free future jeopardizes their own pace of development, and demonstrating that this is an economic opportunity and that the development of alternatives is in their interest as well as in the interest of the survival of humankind.
Thanks so much. Angela, do you want to ask the follow-up question? Oops, you're on mute, Angela. Oops. There you go.
Sorry about that. Besides rejoining the Paris Accords, what else do you think the U.S. president can do in early 2021 independently independent of the cooperation of Congress or other countries to respond to the crisis?
Well, I do think that thank you, Angela. I think one of the things Lissette asked about that I didn't address, and I should in this context, is coming to terms with the fact that that the refugee crisis we already see around the world is for a host of other reasons, will be compounded by multiple factors as the climate crisis continues. And so, just as I am thinking about, and many people are thinking about, the importance of comprehensive immigration reform, as we develop those proposals, we have to reconsider what it means from the perspective of welcoming and sheltering refugees. And that is not an American challenge alone. That's a global challenge. It will require a collaboration with our allies as well. You know, I do think, as I used to say to business people, Angela, when we take them on official trade missions, and we get back, and there was all this expectation that you have a fistful of, purchase orders when you got off the plane. I always make the point, you have to make friends before you make money. And I think the same is so when it comes to security and some of the refugee issues. We have to make friends before we develop comprehensive global solutions, and that means restoring our relationships with existing allies and building relationships with new ones.
Speaking of immigration, Angela, do you want to ask that next question?
Yes. Executive orders such as the one exploiting the term public charge demonstrate that our current immigration system was founded in a shameful era of discrimination and bigotry, and that family members of Americans abroad are allowed entry to the U.S. through a patchwork of fragile band-aids and weakly defended interpretations. Would you restore the principle of family reunification? And how would your plan for immigration improve the situation for spouses, partners, and relatives of Americans living abroad like us who wish to return home with their families?
Thank you so much for that question. There are so many things that are broken or outdated about our current immigration regime, if you will, and that is a very serious one that you've brought up. I think family unification has to be a part of our immigration overhaul, and I do think it has to be an overhaul because it is, as you said in the question, a patchwork of a bunch of different strategies and band-aids, many of them with kind of smelly origins, frankly. And I think that has to be faced. One of the reasons why I started out talking about our values as a nation is that I think it has to be a frame for how we think about what the solution should be to what ails us, and including immigration. So as I think about a comprehensive overhaul, I do think that in addition to border security, we have to have a path to citizenship for the millions of people who are in the United States today and are contributing so that they can come out of the shadows and be a part of mainstream American life. And we have to rationalize the system for newcomers coming so that, in fact, we offer a welcoming hand to families who are trying to be reunified, to your question, to the strivers and strugglers, the folks who are full of creativity and grit, who have always seen the American dream as central to the character of our country, and we stop these implicit or explicit favoring of folks from certain places who don't so much look like you and me, and instead make it about the character and the contribution of folks who want to make America home and make America better.
Well, thank you so much. That's a really great point and well said. Here's a question that's important for many listeners on the call today. We've already heard in the chat box, in fact, about it. And it's a question we ask all of our candidates. We talked earlier a little bit about this as well. Regulatory guidance from the Treasury Department could alleviate the harms of FATCA, which are suffered by thousands of Americans living and working abroad. Would you commit to direct the Treasury Department to study and then implement new guidance that would provide relief to ordinary Americans living abroad who are demonstrably not evading taxes?
Yes, that's a pretty straightforward and easy one, Julie. I will say that I think the tax system generally is another big system that could do for a fresh look. My view is that we should have a much simpler, more straightforward tax system where we have it is certainly progressive, but where we at least significantly reduce the numbers of loopholes and deductions and so forth, so that everyone is contributing according to his or her ability. And I think it has to take account of modern life, which is that many Americans are global citizens. And so moving toward a residency-based tax system has a lot to recommend it. At the same time, I think soliciting and encouraging not just the Treasury Department, but others to give us ideas about how we deal with folks who are affirmatively trying to cheat, individuals and companies, and avoid their obligation to contribute to the common good, because taxes are just the price of civilization, but also take account of the way folks today live their lives in multiple destinations, in some cases as permanent or long-time residents overseas.
Thank you. So just to clarify for all of our listeners, because it really is an important question. So you would say, yes, it's time to take a look at RBT and see what we can do next about making this something that we can implement at a revenue neutral way.
Correct, and thank you for the point about revenue neutral, because I do think that's important, and I know a lot of other folks have given thought to this, including some of your colleagues and Democrats abroad. So, the way I have, in my experience, solved problems is acknowledge that no one person, no one candidate, no one party has a corner on all the best ideas. The greatest power of a president, very much like a governor, is the convening power. That you can get everybody at the table, sometimes folks who don't talk to each other, and get them to problem solve together. And this is how I think we have to come at the issue of FATCA and frankly of the tax system generally.
Oh, thank you so much. We really appreciate that. Lissette, would you like to ask our next question? Lissette? Oh, and you're on mute. Lissette, oh, there you go.
Yes, I'm on. Yes, this question is related to health care.
Yes.
In the 2019 survey of Americans living abroad, Democrats abroad found that many of our members cited their reason for living abroad as affordable health care.
Yes.
These numbers include healthcare refugees who cannot afford to return to live in the U.S. due to the high cost of health care and the threat of bankruptcy due to illness. Under your healthcare plan, will Americans currently living abroad at all income levels and states of wealth, of health as well, be able to return to live in the U.S. and receive quality, affordable, accessible health care for their families at reasonable cost and without the threat of bankruptcy?
Well, first of all, thank you, Lissette, for the question. And no American should have to worry about bankruptcy alongside the worry that goes with a serious illness. It's just, I think that truth for many people is exactly the kind of thing that is counter to the values of this country. And so back to the point about making policy consistent with our values. Very, very interesting how most of the candidates in this round are talking more about access than they are about system costs. And we have to get at both. My experience in Massachusetts, extending healthcare to 99% of our residents today, was that the piece of legislation that Governor Romney signed and that took effect the day I took office dealt mainly with access and not so much with cost. And that keeping that broad coalition together so that we could focus on bringing system costs down was critical. My own view is that the ACA should include a public option. It could very well be that that public option is Medicare. because I think there is a creative tension that comes from having the private industry, private insurance industry, have to figure out how to compete for the numbers of folks who would move to that no-cost or low-cost public option by improving their game and frankly having to think through in fresh ways total system costs, which is good for everyone. And I also think there's a benefit in Medicare having to think again about whether its range of offerings is enough. Because most people who are eligible for Medicare, who can, here at home will buy a private insurance policy on top of that, a supplemental policy on top of that, because Medicare doesn't go far enough. The other thing I would say, Lissette, and I think this is probably something that your membership would understand more than most, is that we are very peculiar in this country about taking the value of lessons learned in other parts of the world and thinking about how they might apply here. That is not to say that Canada has it just right, or the UK has it just right, or that members of the EU have it just right. But there are lessons to be learned about how to ratchet down overall system costs so that quality care is available to everyone everywhere, which should be our objective, and available means or includes affordability.
Well, thank you so much. And we would be delighted to share our stories because, as you mentioned, you know, Americans abroad, we are probably the biggest constituency that has experienced universal health care and are familiar with both the cost and the accessibility. So that's, and we have gathered hundreds of stories about healthcare that we would love to share with campaigns. Our last question.
This is how you get better solutions.
Exactly. You look at other models, exactly. So our last question is about voter protection. I don't know if you're aware, but Democrats abroad, one of the biggest things we do is get out the vote abroad. And so voter protection is incredibly important to us. We see its impact across the United States. And while federal legislation provides some protection for overseas voters, this legislation just does not go far enough to counter the challenges that states and recently the Trump administration have set up to limit voting from abroad. At the moment, about almost 70% of abroad ballots are returned by postal mail due to state requirements, yet postal delivery is really fraught with problems. And during each election, thousands of ballots do not arrive on time to be counted. How would you help protect the rights of Americans abroad to vote while helping states ensure that ballots are returned safely?
You know, we have in our policy platform, we'll be rolling out something called the Democracy Agenda, which is about this very issue for Americans wherever they are. I don't know what it is about some of the positions we have seen over time from the Republican Party and that have been enacted into law that make you wonder whether they could win a fair fight. Whether they believe they could win a fair fight. It seems to me easy access to the ballot and a meaningful opportunity to have that vote count is as fundamental as it gets. And that ranges from the amount of money, much of it dark in our elections today, to the ease with which we are able to register to have those votes counted, whether you are, in South Carolina or Georgia, or living overseas. I think there are also issues around how we have suppressed or purged voting rolls domestically. All of that has accumulated over time to make access to our democracy compromised. And that has to be called out and dealt with, I think, in a comprehensive piece of legislation. This is something I have personal experience with as well, having served as head of the Civil Rights Division and having done in my private civil rights litigation practice a number of lawsuits around access to the ballot. So my antenna are up to begin with, and obviously, maybe it's not obvious, but because you asked the question, being sensitive to the needs and interests of Americans living abroad. Military families, very much a similar issue about having the opportunity to register, to vote, and to have those votes counted. So you can count on comprehensive piece of legislation to assure that every American everywhere has access to a functioning democracy here in the United States.
Oh, thank you so very much. We are really appreciative of your thoughts on that. We're working with Fair Fight on voter protection, but having a federal support is incredibly important for making that happen. Before we sign off,
terrific organization.
Oh, they are wonderful. We're going to be talking to Stacey Abrams in January. In fact, she's joining us. So you're in good company.
Indeed.
So thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us and dig into a few of the questions we cared deeply about. Before we sign off, just a reminder that Governor Patrick's petition is on the Democrats Abroad website, and that's located at www.democratsabroad.org/Patrick. Again, that's www.democratsabroad.org/Patrick. We've added the link in the chat box. Go ahead and click over. Governor Patrick, would you like to add one last word?
Well, just first of all, to thank you and all of your colleagues for joining today. I know we're in various time zones. I think Lissette might be the one closest to where I am in Chicago today. But I thank you all for caring about our democracy and for paying attention to our campaign. I invite you to go on our website, devalpatrick2020.com, and to sign up to volunteer. And I ask everyone to please sign the petition so that I can appear on your ballot. This is your democracy. This is our future. This is not about me, it's about us and how we reclaim a sense of national community, that we have common destiny and a common stake in that. That has been, I think, eroding over a very long time and is worth fighting for. So I thank everyone for your time, and I look forward to working with you.
Likewise. Thank you so much, Governor. And thanks again to everyone who joined us today. We look forward to seeing you in other calls and of course, at our primary next spring. Go ahead, Angela. You want to do our closing remarks?
Yeah, I hope everyone's enjoyed this global town hall today. We definitely need people to donate. So if you could please go to democratsabroad.org/donate. We're a 100% volunteer organization, and mostly donations is what we run on. That way we can bring more events like this to Americans around the world. We also need your help. We'd love to have your help as a volunteer. Next year it's going to be all hands on deck, and you can go to democratsabroad.org/volunteer to get involved. First-time volunteers or people who've maybe had to step out a while can come back and join us. We need everybody because we have to defeat Donald Trump. That's our most important job, and to elect other Democrats. With that, we're going to be ending the call. Thanks again to Governor Patrick for joining our town hall today. And remember, go to democratsabroad.org/donate and democratsabroad.org/volunteer. If you have any questions about voting, you can always get help from our GOTV team at gotv@democratsabroad.org. And remember, please sign the petition for Governor Patrick at democratsabroad.org/Patrick. Thanks a lot, everybody.
Thanks, Angela. Thanks, Lissette. And many, many thanks to Governor Patrick. Thanks, y'all. Y'all have a great rest of your day.
Yeah, Happy New Year.
Take care.
Happy New Year to everyone.
Happy New Year to you.